I have a slide, maybe? There we go. All right. So welcome. We're so glad you are here today. Before we get into the message today, we have been taking some time since our anniversary service between now and Easter, taking a look at some of the things for our church to go, hey, what's been going on? Some of the things you might know about, some of them you might not. And so we wanted to highlight some things. Last week, we took the time to say thank you so much for your generosity. And we highlighted some things that we've been doing in the church through our general fund and some things we've been doing through our legacy fund. And so if you missed that, go back and listen to last week's message if you weren't able to be here or you just wanted to go back and review that. And we also talked about that today would be available to you if you said, hey, I want a more comprehensive look or more detailed plan. We do have a church budget, and we also have our financial statement. And if you would like to get any copies of that, you can write that on your connection card, or you can actually email our church administrator, Kathy Richards, which is at kathy@riversunited.church. And in a minute, we're going to go over some of the leaders in our church and her email address. I'll tell you how you can get that easily, and all the leaders in our church, to be quite honest. So if you want to know more about that, please let us know. If you got questions about it, we'd be happy to share anything with you, from our financial statements to our P&L statements, which is profit loss. See, I do know something. And so if you want any of that, we are a very open book church, and we want to make sure that you are able to do that. I want to say one thing before we get started any further, is to say, when we take a moment to talk about what's going on in the church, if you're brand new with us and you're kind of checking us out, you are so welcome in on this dialogue. This isn't like, hey, you have to check out. Maybe it's one of those that you're taking a look at to say, hey, do I want to be part of it? And you're welcome to have any of that information as well. If you want our bylaws or anything like that, just let Kathy know. She can give you anything you'd like to have. We also highlighted last week our legacy fund, which is a fund where we give above and beyond every year to do special projects, things that we feel like, hey, the passions of our church, but not just our passions, but the things that God has laid on our heart to be able to give above and beyond, to not use here, but to use in our community, to use around the world. And we highlighted a lot of those things last week. Next Sunday, we'll be taking up our legacy fund. It's a fund we take up once a year. And we ask you guys to pray about it, so we're not constantly bringing people up on stage saying, hey, hey, can you give to this? Can you give to that? And it's responsible, but then we take it up one time a year. So if you want to do that, that's great. I want to tell you, if you do want to give to it, here's how it will work. On our online giving, there'll be a little place where you can check the box for Legacy Fund. If you want to give through our offering envelopes, all you have to do is write on there Legacy Fund, and we'll remind you of that again next week. So that's what's been going on there. And I want to kind of shift gears now and talk a little bit about our leadership here at the church. And if you want to see any of our leaders, there is a QR code on today's message that all you have to do is scan the QR code, and it has a list of all of our leadership, including the different boards and ministry leaders and all those kinds of things are all there, along with their contact info. We give you their email addresses. If you want to contact them or you call them, just call our church line. We can get you in touch with them as well. So we just want to make sure you have access to all of it. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of tell you who our leaders are. We've added some new ones, and so we just want to make sure you know, and some of you guys, you may not have even known some of these leadership teams. And so I guess I'll start. The first one we don't have a picture of because I'm standing up here on stage, so there you go. So for those of you that did not know, I'm the lead pastor here at Rivers United Church. My name is John, and John Hunter. And so my role in this church is both to pray for you guys, to also preach, on which you probably know that because you hear me up here every week, and also to lead our leadership teams. And I don't do this by myself. We do it through leaders, and it's my job to lead them and pray for them, and it's an honor and a privilege to get to serve on that. Now, I want to say, as we take a look at leadership, one of the things I want you to think about is this. This is not about saying that just because somebody has that role, it makes anybody better or lesser. And in fact, the Bible is very clear on that. There's no favoritism in the kingdom of God. That God has gifted everyone. Some he has gifted in leadership, some he's gifted in other areas. But the reason why I wanted to highlight it is under our leadership is organizing teams of ministry. And you may want to be part of one of those teams. And if you do, then what I would suggest is talk to them, because it's very important that we work together. And so I appreciate them leading and organizing, and I just want to make sure you know who these guys are. The first place I'll start is this. We have overseers in our church. Now, these are not people that are here or even part of our church family. They're outside of our church family that provide oversight for our church. They're pastors. And the first one is Pastor Eric Dingler. He used to be on staff here. He was the lead pastor at Coastal City Church, and then we merged. I led New Branch Community Church, and then we merged into Rivers United, and we co-led for a season. And now Eric's traveling all around the world, but he also serves as an overseer here. The role of overseer as a pastor does a couple of things for us. One, it provides personal accountability for me. It provides encouragement for me. It provides some guys that are really good in ministry and leadership that I can go to say, hey, what are some of the best practices? It also provides for our board and the rest of the church to be able to say, hey, in times of need, they can let us know best practices. They can minister to us. They can also do this. If for some reason I became incapacitated or you guys removed me, I don't know why you would do that, but anyway, but if you did, they could come in and kind of help you through that process, which is really great to have that level of leadership. So Eric was the first one. We have two brand new ones. And before that, I do want to take just a moment and say, for you that maybe didn't hear, we used to have an overseer. His name was Pastor Daryl Rowland. He was in Georgia. Amazing man. He got cancer and he passed away last year. And so the reason why it took us so long adding new overseers, I think quite honestly, was it was so sad to lose him. He was such a powerful influence in my life and Pastor Eric's life. And so anyway, but we do know it's time to add more. And so we've added Pastor Brandon Goff, who is a senior pastor at Radiate Church in Columbia, South Carolina. It's a very flourishing church, very cutting edge. Brandon also is the network director of Acts 2 Network that we used to be part of. And so I believe that he will provide some incredible leadership to us. I look forward to getting him to even come here sometime, and maybe you guys can meet him. And then the other overseer we added was Lindsay Poteet, who has been a pastor of pastors, honestly, for many years. He pastored Antioch Christian Church, the church that my dad pastored later. In fact, he was the reason why we came to Windsor. He's interim pastor for about every church in the area. Years ago, he used to be the pastor at Believers, that's in Chesapeake. And he also was the director of the Peninsula Rescue Mission. So he comes with unbelievable expertise and maturity. And he will be coming here on Mother's Day. And so we look forward for you guys to be able to meet him, but they provide leadership. So that's our overseers. The other thing we have is we have a board for our church. Now, we don't want to take the spirituality out of it. We're not a corporation, but we made it one board. And the reason why we did that was not because we don't understand the difference between elders and trustees or separation in those, but we found as the church our size to have two different entities, one that does finance and one that does spiritual things. We found that we were constantly meeting together anyway, and so we just kind of merged that into one board. And our board in our church, really the focus is this, not on the day-to-day operations, but what these guys do is they make sure that we're going in the right spiritual direction and the strategy of how to get there, both in setting policies, financial policies, spiritual policies, all those kinds of things. And also to kind of look down the road and say, hey, where do we need to be, and start making decisions in that direction. So those that serve on my board, they also hold me into account in many cases as well. Those that serve on the board, I'll mention them by name. So Pete Ocker, Charles Brock, Butch Castle. And I will say, Butch, if you could just raise your hand. Butch and Karen just became grandparents this past weekend. And so, yep. With their first grandbaby, Philip, Matt and Samantha, who are part of our church family as well, and we can't be more excited for them. Anyway, we'll just take that moment. So, John Paul Creason, Sean Domer, and Michael Sawyer. Now, all of these guys have been serving since we merged, and I can't thank them enough for their leadership. And we've also now added a brand new member to our board, and is Barbara Peak. And so we do appreciate these guys for their church leadership. Anything you want to know about overseers and them, you can go to that QR code, and all their contact info is there. Okay, so we also have community group leaders. I'm not going to cover today, but all of our group leaders are also there on that list that you can contact. I've talked about them in the past, and we'll talk about them again. In no way is that making them lesser, but for the sake of time, we're gonna just cover our ministry leads, and we'll come back to group leaders another day. But our group leaders are the backbone of our church. In small groups in our church, where we meet in groups of around 10 to 15 people, they really make up what we apply the word there. We do life together. It's really relational. If you're not part of a community group, I highly recommend being part of one. Our ministry leads are these, and what ministry leads do is this, is they allow us to be able, they do the day-to-day operations. They lead certain ministries that help us be able to accomplish the vision and mission that God has given us. So here's our ministry leaders. The first one I'll mention is Pastor Dave Clefman. He is our associate pastor, and he handles guest services and events in our church. He also guest services includes both the parking lot, everything you see in here, the stuff that we get on Sunday morning behind the seats, and also coffee. So we do appreciate that ministry a lot because some of us can't function without it. All the events in the church he organizes, and then anything else I don't want to do, Dave, no, I'm just playing. But the good part about Dave, and I will say this, that I haven't mentioned, he is on staff, and so I want to just kind of tell you who's on staff that we're paying. So I'm actually the only full-time employee here, and I do appreciate us being able to do that. It allows me to minister in ways that I couldn't if I was working a job. Pastor Dave is here part-time. All the other people are part-time staff. And we don't separate out saying, hey, if you're a ministry lead, you're a ministry lead. Doesn't matter if you're on staff or not. But sometimes being able to pay allows us to be able to do more ministry because they're able to have hours that they wouldn't have otherwise. So Pastor Dave Clefman, and he is an ordained pastor. Pastor John Baston works for our creative arts. He leads our music. He leads all the AVL stuff, a lot of things behind the scenes, including the video and taking care of a lot of things that are like that. And John is also an ordained pastor and has, both Dave and him have a master's of divinity. So there you go. So anyway, and a master's in other things. So anyway, they're very smart people. They're much smarter than I am. So that's really great to have them on staff. Our River Kids director is Katie Creason. She handles our kids ministry. And so Kathy Richards is our church administrator. I mentioned her a while ago. Kathy handles everything from our finances to human resources to all the accounting procedures and all the other things. She meets with our board regularly. She makes sure she handles getting all the information to our CPA, and our CPA is Deronda Posner. She is not on staff, so I didn't mention her, but we do have a CPA. And Kathy handles all of those types of things for us. There's another one. She's new to our staff. Her name is Marie Hunter, and I actually know her. She's my wife. And so she's our newest staff member, to be honest with you. It's not that Marie hasn't been working for the church all along and not as the pastor's wife. We didn't hire her for being the pastor's wife. We hired her to do communications. And if you guys have noticed, we've been able to do more stuff as a result of that. All the graphic work, all the stuff that happens with our website, the new website that we had, Marie oversees all of that along with many, many other things. And we really appreciate her being able to be on staff. And I will say before we switch from staff members is that all of these guys do above and beyond what they get paid to do. We all volunteer in different ways, and so I just want to make sure you know. But we do appreciate the money that we have to be able to have some staff. Now I'm going to shift to non-staff, which means they're not getting paid, but I got to tell you, they do so much work for this church. So Connections is under Sally Ocker. And so she handles everything from getting people, whenever you come in, you've probably heard from Sally. She gets you involved in ministry. She helps with all types of stuff as it relates to helping assimilate people into our church. Keith Richards handles our first responders, which includes our security team and also our medical team. And then for missions, Sherry Stone. And Sherry handles both benevolent needs. She handles meeting with our missionaries and all kinds of things like that and helping with some of the projects that we do, but especially local ministries that have help for benevolence. Sherry really helps partner with them, and she is an incredible asset. Charles Brock is our operations, and what operations means right now, eventually it may mean other things, but right now it's focused specifically on the facility. So all the changes that you see, all the roofing and all that kind of stuff, he handles overseeing that. And so he does all of that. So if you got any questions about the facility, Charles would be happy to answer them. If you wonder what's going on next door, we're just waiting on the county to approve us to be able to tear all that stuff down. So it's not that we don't know that, but so please don't give him a hard time about that. Okay. And Carol Owen is our prayer leader. And so not only does she handle the altar workers that come here on Sunday morning to pray with you after service and things like that. She also has a prayer team that prays for this church specifically, for me, for the leadership, for you guys. And Kathy Overman is our tech. And if you don't know what tech means, then you probably don't need to be part of it. I'm just playing. But she handles a lot of things beyond what we can do. Right now, she's spending a lot of time back there in the sound booth because she's doing the video. And I think she would love for me to plug to say, we are looking for people to help with video. So if you have any desire to do that, if you look back there, Kathy would love to talk to you about maybe being part of that ministry. But she has an expertise that's amazing. And then last but not least, we have a Rapid Impact Youth, and Fight leads our high school on that, and then Jessica Sawyer leads our middle school. So if you would, can we just give our leaders a hand clap of praise before God? So I know that was a lot to take in all at one time, but I wanted you guys to see who they were and realize who's on staff and all that kind of stuff, and that we can celebrate what God is doing and how he has raised up leaders to help us. I could not do ministry without these guys. They are one of the greatest parts of my life along with you guys. Now I'll say this, if you would, please pray for them, because it's hard when you lead. Can I tell you, people are difficult, right? It's just like pray for yourselves as well. By the way, everybody that's on staff prays for you. And so I just want to make sure we know, hey, we're in this together. The other part I would say is this. Pray about your part. Whether it's leadership or another role, pray about it. And the reason why I showed you all this is so that you could say, hey, if one of these things piqued your interest and you go, God might be leading me on this path, please have a conversation with our ministry leads. That's why we're here. That's what they are here to do. It's not just to do the work of ministry, but to equip people that have those gifts to do them and to organize us to be able to accomplish the plan and mission that God wants. And I want you guys to be part of it. The other thing I know is this, and this is the reason why I ask you to pray for them and pray for yourself, is that it has a cost. It's not easy doing it. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today, the cost. What is the cost, not only of leadership, what is the cost of following Jesus? Did you know there's a cost? Today we're going to take a look at it from Jesus' own words. Luke chapter 14 is what we're going to take a look at today. Luke 14 and verse 25, it says, large crowds were traveling with Jesus. And turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. Is that what you thought he would say? Did you ever think you'd hear come out of the lips of Jesus, hate? And if anything, my family? You got to be kidding, right? That's going to require an explanation. But I do think it's important that we cover it, right? We have to cover all of the scripture. Some people overlook this one, and they go, why in the world would you ever read something like this? Maybe you're already checked out, and I hope that you won't, because I do want to explain what he means and what he did not mean. Very important that I do. Otherwise, we're going, I'm supposed to hate? And in one place, he said to love my enemies and hate my family? That's not what he's saying. Now, I will give a caveat, and I do want to be very careful about qualifying words, because I do know people can manipulate that way. But I do think it's important in this case to understand what it meant in the original language. Just like with love, they had many words that meant love. In the Greek, they have many words that mean hate. Some of them mean to hate, like you hate an enemy, like you hate someone because they did something horrible to you. But this word is not the same one where it says, do not hate, where God says not to hate. And you're going, how could Jesus tell us to hate when he actually commanded us to love our families, to honor our fathers and mothers, that Jesus Christ himself, not long before this, taught those very things? Because this word hate doesn't mean hate in the way that we're thinking of it. It means this. It means not as much. It means not love them as much as you love me. That's what it means. It doesn't mean hate like maybe we were thinking of the word hate. It means to prefer them over, or having me be the top priority. It means at times, if you follow me, there will be people that hate you. It may mean that it causes your family not to like you if you follow me, but he's saying, I want you to follow me anyway. That sometimes it will cost you with your relationships. But can I tell you something else? That when you follow Jesus, when you put Jesus in the top spot, when you love him more than anything else, your marriages will be better. Is that true? Your relationship with your parents will be better. Your relationship with your kids will be better. In fact, what he said, relationship with your employers, everything in your life will be better when you follow Jesus. That's true. It doesn't mean they'll always accept it that way, but it means if you want great relationships, you got to get the order right. In fact, next week we're going to talk about that. Matthew chapter 6. I don't want to give away too much because I got to preach that next week. Matthew 6, verse 33, it says, seek me first, seek my kingdom and my righteousness, and then all these other things that you're worried about will be added unto you. It means everything else will be better if you follow Jesus. But I think what he's actually saying, there's a cost to following me. And he said it in a very provocative way. Okay. Whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. I know he carries the cross. Did you know he's asking you to too? Now, for us, when we hear a word like cross, it doesn't typically make us cringe because we're thinking of religion. Some of you guys wear it around your neck, which if you did that in the Roman Empire, they would think you were weird, right? Because they would be like, that's an execution device. It's the worst of all executions. They had perfected the way to torture somebody the worst. So when he brought out the word cross, they're thinking, we want to get as far away from that. In fact, a lot of people stopped following him that day. But I would ask you to consider what he's saying. You know what I think he's saying, though? He's saying, in front of the purpose that you have, hidden behind the purpose, hidden behind your problem is your purpose. It is the calling. That there's always going to be a problem, there's always going to be a cross, there's always going to be a cost associated with your purpose, with your destiny. And you're never going to have it if you're not willing to pay the price. You see, Jesus was, right? He knew that the cross is what he had to do in order to get to what? Resurrection. In order to get to redemption. What he could offer us, not his resurrection, of course, right? He died, but not only so he could be raised from the dead, but so that he had the power of death, hell, and the grave, and he could offer it to you for your redemption. There's a cost. Now he's saying there's a cost for you. Did you know there was a cost for Moses? In order to get the children of Israel to the promised land, before he could get them there, there was a Pharaoh. There was a wilderness. There was a 40-year-long journey to get to the promised land. There was a cost in order to get his destiny. Between David and his destiny, between David and the time that he became king after he was anointed king, was a giant named Goliath. There's always going to be a giant in front of your destiny, in front of your purpose. Lazarus had to die before Jesus could rise him from the dead, right? He called him out. So Jesus is calling a dead man to come out. Can I just say this? If you find your giant, more than likely your purpose is behind it. Goliath was the best thing that ever happened to David. If you want to read about it, 1 Samuel chapter 17, you can look it up for yourself. Before that day, nobody knew who David was. They did after that day, though, right? You know, David went to that fight with a slingshot. He left with a sword. He never had a sword before that day. David became one of the greatest warriors in all of Israel, but he came that day. You see, your purpose is on the other side of your fear. You see, I believe that today may be an answer to prayer for somebody because your life has gotten difficult. And you've been wondering what God is doing. You thought that was weird because nobody's ever taught you anything like this. You thought when things are difficult, maybe God's not in it. Maybe there's problems and maybe there is, but your fear and your frustration, God is saying, no, I have a plan for that. And what's behind that is my purpose. So don't give up right before your miracle, I believe is what God is saying. In fact, if it's not difficult, if there's not a problem, you can't have a miracle. God doesn't do miracles just to be cool. It's always in the minute of a crisis. Moses never got a miracle until there was a crisis. Lazarus never got a miracle until he was dead, right? So just understand this. Maybe that's the purpose and plan God has for your life. You see, God can do something amazing with your difficult circumstance. I'll say it another way. God can do something amazing with your impossible circumstance. I think there's somebody here that you're about to quit. That's why God's sending this word. I think it's why Jesus sent the word there, because he realized he had crowds of people that loved it when he could do miracles and all of that. By the end, not long after this, they all left him. In fact, no one was there. They only cared what they could get from him, you understand. They didn't realize there was a cost, but he was letting them know there's a cost to following me. Okay. Two things that I want to give you before we go any further. Two problems that I see. The reason why we're struggling. One, I don't think we knew there was a cost, but here's two problems you can write down, and we'll explore them through his passage. Complacency and insecurity. We're going to take a look at both. Complacency and insecurity. He goes on to say this. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you. Saying this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. It got difficult, right? I didn't count the cost because I didn't realize there was one. Jesus wants to make sure you know there's a cost. And what I want to kind of define a little bit for you is complacency. I want to give you three things today as it relates to complacency. The first one is this. If you want to identify complacency in your life, it's an area where you're not giving your best in every area. Do you? Or have you gotten used to just doing just enough to get by, right? Satisfied with less than what God has for you. I don't think he wants you to do that. You see, there's a difference between having peace and complacency. This is very important. Because sometimes we think of that. It's like, well, I really shouldn't try to achieve more because after all, that's kind of greedy. And God's going, I'm calling you further. I'm calling you to greatness. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be satisfied with what God gave us. That's called peace, right? Not that we're hoarding and greedy, and we talked about that last week. You can go back and listen to it. What I'm talking about is complacent, where we start to get comfortable doing less, right? You see, the problematic assumption that I think is taught sometimes, because it's true, we cannot be saved without Jesus, is that God doesn't require anything of us. That's problematic. Everything that God gives you will require maintenance. Sometimes we're no longer putting forth our full effort. We expect reward without sacrifice. I understand. We have anxiety because we can't say no. You see, Jesus was making it very clear. And he did this in more than one passage. If you go back to Matthew 6, you see the exact same thing. He's saying you have to be able to prioritize. And he's saying, if you make me your top priority, then I'll tell you what will happen. Everything else will fall in line. Maybe somebody needed to hear that today. The reason why you'll never get ahead is because you can't say no. You're saying yes to everything. And it will never work. And then when it doesn't work, can I tell you what we do? We deflect blame on others and God. You see, you're in a crisis and you're trying to figure out who's to blame for this crisis. And God's saying, I have a purpose in the giant. I have a purpose in what's in front of you. I have a purpose with what's happening there, so don't deflect the blame. Relationships cost. Nothing is on lock. Does that make sense? Your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your family. Could I do something if you're a parent today and also a spiritual leader? Stop encouraging people to do less than their best. I see that a lot, even in myself, I understand. Or worse, encouraging them when they've done wrong to say, well, that's okay, it's not that big of a deal. Nobody should be judgmental. I get that. Nobody should be judgmental. I get that. And if somebody's struggling, we're not trying to push them down. But I've seen actually people encourage them to continue into a sinful lifestyle as though it has no cost and it has no effect in their life. And they're wondering what's devastating, and it's because we go, oh, no, that's okay. Don't do that. That's about the worst thing you could possibly do. Don't help someone live beneath their potential. Call out the godly man and woman in them. That's our job as leaders. You see, the word from God today is this: I came to stir you up. I came to disrupt your life. And not giving my best in every area is not what God has called us to do. Today, God's calling us out of our comfort zone. The second thing I want to mention about complacency is this: not pursuing new strategies for growth. For some of us, we're still operating off of an old playbook. Does that make sense? Your playbook hasn't changed. I would highly recommend the business book to you. What got you here won't get you there. Have you ever read that? And some people say, well, that's not true. God's never changing. God is never changing, but his methods always do. Did you know that? That the same methods that got them to the promised land were different than what Joshua did when he took them into the promised land. Had they still functioned like they did in a journey, had they still thought manna was going to come down from heaven when they got into the promised land, they would never live under the promises of God. And some of us, we've stopped growing a long time ago. And the reason why God's not blessing your life, is that too close? Sorry. You got to be a lifelong learner. When's the last time you learned something? I know, I'm challenging myself with that. You want to know why I added new overseers? I need to be challenged. The same thing is true for you guys. I remember my grandma Stephenson. It was always interesting to me that up into her 90s, until she got really bad dementia, she died when she was about 97 or 98, and she got really bad dementia. But up till then, she was constantly reading the Bible, constantly journaling, constantly saying the new things that she was learning. Always growing, always growing. When it comes to growth, though, here's what I know, and the same thing was true for her, and the same thing is true for me. Don't wait for somebody to do it for you. You see, I get a lot of requests, and it's okay. I mean, I get it, and I want to do a lot of these as a church, and our ministry leaders want to, but I think there's a lot of people that think, hey, I want my spiritual life to be taken care of by someone else, and it doesn't work that way. You have to learn how to do it yourself. You have to be leading yourself, right? You know what I mean by that? Do you read the Bible? Do you come here to get fed by the Bible, but then you go, hey, I never read it during the week, and you wonder why you're not going deeper? Sometimes people say, I really want to go deep, and I say, hey, are you in the Word of God? No, I don't, but I want to take a class. And you're like, okay, that's great to take a class, but it would be great if you learned how to feed yourself. There's a reading plan on the back. If you've never done it, I would highly recommend starting that, right? Learn how to worship God yourself. Before you walk into the rooms, are you worshiping God? Let me ask you this. Are you gathering with other believers? Yeah, that's why it's important that I have overseers, right? That I take an active part in my own thing. But then some people say, well, you have that and you have this. And I would say, why don't you get in your life? Do you have an inner circle? Do you have people you go to? Are you waiting for them to come to you? If you are, you need to get proactive. And I'm telling you, it will help you in your life. The other thing with being complacent is this: being risk adverse. Sometimes we get where we go, I don't want to risk anymore. The further you go, the easier it is to get that way. I don't want to risk what I have. At the beginning, when you're young and stuff, it doesn't matter if you risk because you don't have anything, right? But the older you get, it gets harder, doesn't it? Can I tell you something about faith? Can I tell you why God selected a teenager to kill Goliath? It wasn't because he wouldn't have used someone else. It's because David was the only one that would have faith. All the old people wouldn't take the risk. He would have used somebody older. We know that. He used Moses at 80 years old to lead them, so don't tell me he can't use them. The only reason why he stopped using some people is because we've become risk adverse. It's the same for me. I get it. It's challenging me in my life. So pursue new strategies for growth. The third one is this: not building relationships that enhance growth. When's the last time you made new relationships? Nothing wrong with keeping the relationships that you have. I get that. But if you want new things, the key to innovation, the key to anything, relationship is the currency for growth. So if you want what you have, keep hanging out with who you've hung out with. That's what it's going to get you. If you want new, then you're going to have to add to that. Right? If you're still hanging out with the friends that you sinned with, you're never going to get past it, right? The Bible says bad company corrupts good character. Doesn't mean we don't try to pull them out. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to have some new ones. If you want to soar with the eagles, you can't run with the turkeys. You get the idea? You got to identify complacency in your life. And I know that's kind of rough. This is not about being judgmental. It's about to help us. I believe God is sending us a word, and I know it might be one of those, it's more like a coach saying, hey, pay attention. Not pushing you down. Please don't take it that way. Take it like it's an answer to your prayer, because some of us have been going, God, where are you? God, what is going on here? And he's given you a plan to overcome this in your life. Jesus goes on to say this, verse 31. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose one coming against 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the others is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. Now, I get the analogy that Jesus is talking, but as I prayed about this, I think I get something where it says peace. I think what he's saying here is this. Some of us, we're desiring peace with that king because we're afraid. See? And he's saying, did you not know you, with whatever you have, is enough with God's help? I think that's important because sometimes we compromise because we're scared of the enemy. It seems like the enemy has outnumbered us. And God is saying, if you would only trust in me, I could help you overcome that. But instead, we're trying to make peace with the enemy. And I got to tell you, it will never work. He's saying if you would only believe God for what he says he'll give you, then it will help us overcome what I believe is one of our main problems, one of my main problems, insecurity. I want to help you identify your insecurities today. Two things. The first one is this: needing affirmation from others. I thought this message would be more fun. Now it's not feeling that way. I don't mean not receiving godly counsel. In fact, in the book of Proverbs, you know what it says? It says plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. So it doesn't mean that we're not getting godly affirmation. It doesn't mean we're not getting godly counsel. What it means is this, is that God has called you to something, but you're looking for people to constantly affirm you because of your insecurity. I don't have confidence to move out. I don't have confidence in what God has given me. Either I haven't heard from God or God has said it. And then after God has spoken to your life and made a calling and you know what he's calling you to do, you're constantly looking for other people to tell you it's okay instead of God. You know, you can't be a leader and not have people that dislike you. Did you know that? So if you're people pleasing, you'll never be the leader that God's calling you to be, because you'll go back and forth on public opinion. You'll shrink back, right? You'll claim peace where there is no peace. Where God is calling you to stand firm, you'll waver. See, so important that we get this part. You can't be a leader and not have people criticize you. You know, some people quit because somebody said something harsh, and now I just can't minister anymore. Am I coming right where you are? Sorry. But you know, you can't be a leader and not have people hate you. When I say hate, I mean the other type of hate, not the kind that Jesus was saying where you like me better. I'm talking about the kind of hate where people actually hate you. They're your enemy. If you're not ready for that, then you're not ready for leadership, right? By the way, you're not just ready for leadership, you're not ready to be a follower of Jesus, because Jesus said, if they hated me, they will hate you. They hated him, they crucified him. And he's saying, you have to carry your cross too. Two things, needing affirmation from others and also not affirming yourself. Let me ask you this. Do you ever clap for yourself? Did you think that's not biblical? Oh, I know what I'm saying. I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm not talking about pride. I'm talking about the ability to receive good things. Or do you always have to have the affirmation of other people? You know, God didn't. If you go back to Genesis chapter 2, do you know after everything he created, maybe you never noticed this, he clapped for himself. Did you know that? There was nobody there. The angels didn't come and clap for him. And you go, where are they at? Why didn't they? And he didn't deflect blame like, I can't believe after all I've done, nobody's appreciated me. You know what he said? That was good. That was very good. He could receive good things. Are you able to receive good things? Or do you have insecurity where you go, I constantly need other people to applaud me, right? I can't receive it myself, so I constantly am looking for other people's affirmation. And when I don't get it, right, what do you do? I know there's different ways to deal with that. There's all kinds of coping skills. One is to become very arrogant, and then I become, right, hard to live with like that. Or have you ever met arrogant people that go, hey, they're not really confident, they're really insecure, because not, you know, they can say really harsh things to other people, but if you say something to them, they're very sensitive. Don't point at them, but you know who I'm talking about, right? Don't look at me, okay, right? We're not talking about pride. We're not talking about false humility. We're talking about confidence in the work that God is doing in your life. Can I tell you what unlocks it, though? Because this is oftentimes where we're missing it. Praising God unlocks the power of God. And we stop praising. We need everybody to applaud us to make us feel better. And can I tell you who's most tired of it? Your spouse. Because here's the thing, it's not that your spouse should not be your cheerleader. It's that your insecurity is really taking a toll on them, and they told me to tell you, no, I'm just playing, right? that it leaks, right? You can't hold on to it. That's why you're constantly asking them, did I do a good job? Did I do this? Did I do that? You know, and I'm never believing, so they're thinking, I'm getting so sick. I'm telling you that, and you're constantly feeling this, and you never feel like it's enough. And the reason is because you're getting it from the wrong source. When you start to follow Jesus, he will give you confidence, right? He who began a good work in you will complete it till the day of Jesus Christ. You don't have to have that from other people. You need to take a moment and appreciate the things that God has done in your life. That requires time, though, see? You have to pause. That's why in the Psalms, you know what it constantly said? Selah. You know what that is? It means pause. It's a musical note that means pause. It means be still and know that I am God. Do you do that? You know what Sabbath is all about? You know why God gave us the Sabbath? It's not because we're physically tired. It's because you're spiritually tired and you're ready to rush to the next thing before you take a moment to praise God. You know, he took a whole day, God did. Do you think God was tired? No. He created the whole world in a week. He didn't say, oh man, I'm so exhausted. No, he took time to appreciate what he had done, and then he says, you do the same thing, or else you know what's going to happen? You're going to burn out. You know what's going to happen? You're going to be frustrated with people. You know what's going to happen? You're going to be afraid. And you're never going to have your destiny. You get it? Can I warn visionaries just for a minute? Because I am one thing, right? Those of us that see a preferred future, those that want to lead and we see where we could go, we're so rushing to get there that sometimes we don't pause in the now to say, look what God is doing here. You'll never get there if you don't. And I got to tell you, the price tag for it, praising God will unlock the power. God inhabits the praises of his people. He finishes it off this way, verse 33. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything, those of you that do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciple. Let me ask you this. Have you qualified your follow? You see, Jesus, I'll do this, but that's as far as I can go. I didn't think I had anything like that in my life until something came up recently, and I realized maybe I do, right? I can't believe you. Maybe here's how your prayer's going. I can't believe that you let this happen. I thought I was further ahead, and then this happened, and now I don't know if I can keep going with you. Let me ask you, let me just say this. Before you unfollow Jesus, ask yourself, if not Jesus, who? If not Jesus, what? You know what I think he's asking you? I think the reason why this test is coming, because I got a feeling some of you are going, man, I thought I had gotten past all this, and now I'm right back where I started. Anybody ever felt like that? And he's going, yeah. And I'll help you in each moment. I will always be there for you. God will do things you can't believe, but it will constantly come where your faith will be tested. And what he's saying is this, not tested like God's looking at you like a lab rat. I want to make sure we're clear. What I mean is this, is that God is testing it like a lifeboat, that when you step on him, he will stand the test if you'll trust him. Everything else won't. We'll talk about payoff next week, okay? Very important that you know what the payoff is, and I can't wait to share that. But before you get there, you know what I think he's asking? He's asking, would you be all in? You know Jesus was, right? He gave it all. And he's saying, I'm asking you to do the same, everything. You know what it means? A blank check, not to the church. Please don't hear us say that. That would be insane. We're talking about to Jesus. Whatever you're asking me to do, whatever the cost, he's saying, I am worth it. He goes further to say this, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? In their day, salt was so important because it was a preservative, and so they used it constantly. He's saying, but if it loses its saltiness, it is neither fit for the soil nor the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears, let him hear. Let them hear. He's saying, if you're not all in, you're not fit. It's not worth the manure. Okay. Right? I mean, he can't man up any more than that, right? But then you know it, right? As we live in complacency and we live there, it's the most miserable place to be when we're insecure and don't know what God has for us. So please don't qualify your follow, because here's the thing, has not Jesus paid everything for you? Has he not done enough for you to trust him with the things you can't understand? If you don't understand that, then come see us, right? But if he has, then I believe his call is this, would you follow me? And so what I'd like to leave you with so that you can wrestle with it, just a couple questions to ask yourself, just a couple things to take a look at. The cost for following Jesus. Salvation is free. I want to make sure we're clear on that. It costs you nothing. Jesus did all of that. Salvation is free. It costs you nothing. It cost him everything. He gave his one and only life for us. He bore all the sin and all of the hell of all of time onto himself so that you can be with him. If you haven't received him, don't try to do the next part. It will never work. But if you have, then he says, now, out of the love you have for me, not out of guilt, not trying to earn, but because I've given you love, the overflow of that, follow me. But following Jesus will eventually cost you something. The final one is this, refusing to follow Jesus will cost you more. I think everybody that was there that day, the ones that left, if they had it to do over again, I think they would tell you, I'd do anything to go back to that day. And you have the ability now, and the only question I have for you today is this, would you follow Jesus? Can I pray for us today? Let's stand for prayer. Father God, we come before you today, and Lord, I just take a moment to thank you for your word, as difficult as it is. Lord, I want to be clear. I'm not preaching at anyone today because, Lord, this message was not for someone else. It was for me, and I know it. So if it seemed harsh, it's because it came to me harsh. But sometimes that's a good thing, that the wounds of a friend are better than kisses of an enemy. We can't keep going that way, Lord. And after all, who wants to live a life of complacency, not receiving their destiny, hiding behind sympathy that's fake and phony? Oh God, you have a heart for us, and we know that. You died on the cross for our sins. There's no one more compassionate than you. And yet you said something like this. I think it's to stir us up today. Lord, I believe that today is an answer to somebody's prayer, that there's somebody going through such a difficult time and they never knew it was going to get this hard, and you're saying you will be there right with them through all of it, but not to quit because of the cost, because you're worth everything. Lord, you paid everything for us, and you're asking us to give it to you. But I know this, Lord, if we give it to you, you will do more than we can dream or think or ask. So I pray, God, help us to overcome our complacency. Help us to overcome our insecurity. And the only way it works, Lord, is when you come in, when we invite you in, when we say we're all in. I think somebody, Lord, they've been kind of testing you out. We've been halfway long enough. It's time to go all in, that we're going to follow you, no turning back. And God, I know when we do, Lord, you said, you'll put me first, and all these other things will fall in place. I think what it really means, nothing else will matter, no matter how it turns out. If we have you, that's all we really need. God, I pray, make us those kind of people in that kind of church, and we'll give you all the honor, glory, and praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, if you need prayer, we'll be here after the service. For everybody else, God bless you. Have a great week.